We're examining the state of the Cleveland Browns roster today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Joe, it is a national holiday for many teams across the league. Happy June 2nd day to you, which means all of those designated post-June 1st cuts, you actually are going to receive the salary cap savings from those transactions back in March.
Well, mini wave of action here in the league, maybe. Trades, cuts, signings.
You hear any buzz, any insider buzz on anything going on anywhere?
I've heard this. This is very big. Jalen Ramsey wants to be traded.
Yeah. Heard they got some phone calls over the weekend.
Yeah. Teams across the league are making phone calls.
Well, I've heard the action has picked up on that front. They thought they had something close to being done. And then kind of that, as you said, that mini spur and wave of action has maybe facilitated, hey, well, hold on now. Let's not do anything crazy yet. Let's maximize what we got here. So, and then, of course, we had the Bryce Huff thing on Friday.
Right. Obviously, Howie Roseman listened to the show and got the clarity he needed.
When we did the assessment on Thursday.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, though. It was very funny to me. I did a story on that about how that is not an attractive contract to move. And Josh Uche got traded last year making $3 million for like a future six, right? So when it came through that the Eagles paid about 2/3, but San Francisco was still taking on like $8 million. So I was like, man, great job, Howie. And there's just some people on the internet that just refuse to compartmentalize how he gave him the contract. How could you compliment him for getting rid of the contract? I don't know. Nobody bats 1,000, right?
Right.
Okay, Howie missed. You can't tell Eagles fans anything because they won the Super Bowl, but okay, Howie missed. And then what he did was he didn't cling to it, or he didn't get stuck holding all the bag.
Right.
He moved on from it. They got value for a player that's going to – San Francisco is going to pay 2x what New England got a 2026 6th for when they traded a player who profiles as a similar player.
The worst thing you can do is cling to a mistake.
Right. Teams that don't.
Yeah.
Well, teams that cling to mistakes.
Oh, boy. Welcome to AFC North week on the podcast. We've done, I guess, is it 3 other divisions to this point?
Yes.
And
start after this week, we're halfway.
Back in the AFC, focusing on the North. Some heavy-hitting teams in this division. And the way that we're doing this is we are going in reverse order of divisional finish last year. So the Browns are up first today. And what Kyle and I do is we assess the entire roster. We put all the players in different buckets. The buckets are roster cornerstone, quality starter, rookie, sufficient starter, replacement level, quality depth, non-roster caliber, incomplete evaluation, and a practice squad developmental player. Every position has different weighted value associated with them. And at the end of this project, we'll be able to rank all the rosters and all the different components of the rosters. And today, the Browns are under the microscope. We'll attack this conversation first by discussing the skill players, then the trenches, and then the back seven on defense.
Yeah. A lot of youth at running back. Obviously, the Nick Chubb era has come to a close, and they draft Quinshon Judkins in the top 40 and Dylan Sampson in the 4th round to go with Jerome Ford, who's kind of always shown nice flashes of being a guy who can make some plays for you, right? So I think there's not a lot of proof of concept, but there's obviously a lot of upside play with Sampson and how explosive he is, and Judkins through 2 very different college offenses with Ole Miss and then Ohio State this past year. I think there's good intrigue there. Same thing for tight end with Harold Fannin It's going to be this is a team that when we do a lot of the grading, some of the guys that are in key spots, they're going to get zeros, right? Because they're rookies or they're players that haven't played enough for us to have a definitive qualification for them. But that means they're a high variance football team. And if all these guys come in like gangbusters, and all of a sudden you got David Njoku and Harold Fannin to go with these young running backs that they obviously feel some type of way about based off where they drafted him, then I think those ancillary pieces to go with Jerry Jeudy as the hallmark guy on the outside and Diontae Johnson as an interesting signing can give you a foundation that can be dangerous on any given week.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this comes together because I think when you say, what do we got? I think you point to Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku, right? And then Jerry Jeudy, man, he had like 1,200 yards last year with,
it's about time.
With that quarterback slate, it was not.
Makes you ask some questions about Denver, though, too, doesn't it? What that Denver situation was like that we couldn't put it together.
Honestly, that's a really good point. And this receiver core was Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy at this point last year, and they've really kind of flipped a lot of that upside down, leaning now into Cedric Tillman and Jamari Thrash. And boy, I'm really interested to see what Diontae Johnson gives to this football team because coming out of Pittsburgh, you felt good about him, right? Like a separator, route runner. And then really since he went to Carolina, things have just been really, really goofy. But I think he's, if his career is going to get going, it's going to have to be right now because this guy will be an afterthought very, very quickly. But the point being is it's Jeudy and Njoku, who I have as quality starters.
Yep.
And what?
So two comments here. The first one being, I think when you look at Cleveland and what their spending situation has been, I'm glad that there's a lot of youth and unproven when we look at what they have because they still made some decisions to make big financial commitments to players and maintain players, right?
Yeah.
And even like Wyatt Teller is getting this year in a contract year, is getting a $10 million option bonus, which is going to prorate out an extra $8 million in the future years. Like you need to have some spots on your team where cost controlled for multiple years of time. And the skill group, certainly aside of those couple of centerpieces, is one of those spots. And I didn't really, when I first sat down and thought about Diontae Johnson, who right now I have graded as a sufficient level starter, but we're on a rapid descent based off of what it's been.
Yeah.
I didn't really like that signing when I first thought about it, but then I considered what happens if it's not Joe Flacco that wins the job. If it's any other name, if it's Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, or Shadur Sanders, I like having a little bit more proven second option on the perimeter.
Yeah.
In that case, you know what I mean? Like I think it's different if it's Joe, where Joe's performance, if he's throwing to Tillman and Thrash and Woods, these are David Bell, not a lot of big separators, but Joe can throw those. Whereas these young quarterbacks that I think maybe need a little bit more definitive reads to make, getting a separator type, another separator type, I think is a good way to position yourself to help if any of the young quarterbacks win the starting job.
I feel like this team's going to play a lot of different quarterbacks this year. This won't be a 17-game starter situation.
What if it was, though? Who would it be?
Oh, gosh. That's a freaking great question.
It'd have to be Flacco, right?
Like he wins the job and just like it plays well enough to stay there.
Yeah.
That's probably the most likely based on what I think about the depth. And if anyone, like, because they would, number one, step one is to being a 17-game starter is being the week one starter.
Right.
And then not only being healthy, but playing well enough that you don't, the coaching staff doesn't scratch the itch to see somebody else.
Yeah.
Don't know that would happen with the other guys. And we've seen there's like a little bit of a proof of concept of them being able to reel off some wins with Flacco. And this is a team that, not that we're having a big picture conversation right now, but the way that it's set up, there's a toe in the water of a rebuild, and there's a toe in the water of, boy, let's see if we can be competitive and, get in somehow. And I think that's a dangerous place to live, especially when your quarterback situation looks like this. But if Flacco's the starter, you feel like, okay, we can make this supporting cast work because of his experience. If it's not, you worry about their ability to elevate the rookie or the young player.
Yeah.
So. All right, trenches coming up next year. The offensive line's been a big story for years in Cleveland. How does that look? And then a lot of transition on the defensive line. We'll talk about that here next. Be sure to stick with us. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. And you can post your job with help of LinkedIn's new feature that helps you write job descriptions, that you can quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. Here's a pro tip. You can add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to get those qualified candidates. It's no wonder that 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
So we got to trade one of these guards. Now that we're post June 1st, we can split the cap. We're getting ready to pay Joel Bitonio a $10.745 million option bonus, which is going to get spread out across five years. He's not under contract next year as a 34-year-old guard. Teller's got the same deal. $10 million option bonus, age 34. Our projected starting 5 is DeJuan Jones, Joel Bitonio, Ethan Posich, Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin. We signed Tevin Jenkins on a 1-year, $3 million deal. We got a third-round pick in Zach Zinter on the bench. Get to work. Don't defer another $8 million for next year just to keep these guys in their late-stage years. Please don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, you'd like to think. I mean, honestly, finding a way to get Zinter into the lineup feels like that would be helpful. You know, young players, get him some run, get him some experience. DeJuan Jones, I think, is the big wild card here, stepping in at left tackle.
Can't be any worse than Wills. As long as DeJuan stays healthy, it can't be any worse.
It's kind of been a challenge for him. I like that this team with Conklin, who's not a million years old. He feels like he's a million years old. He's not. He's 30 or 31.
31 season this year.
Yeah, it's not. He's not that old, but he's been injured. This feels like the right team to have signed Cornelius Lucas, who has been very good at just filling in at either tackle spot. So a hedge against Jones and what the development there looks like, and of course Conklin and the injury concerns. But the ceiling here that used to exist between a high pick in Wills, Bitonio as one of the best guards in the league, Teller as one of the best guards in the league, Conklin as like at least at one point probably a quality starter, and Pochik, who's always kind of became a sufficient level starter. This doesn't have the same feel as it used to, because I don't think we've seen the best football out of Bitonio and Teller. Will's flamed out. We need to see if Jones can do it. Conklin, can you stay healthy and can you perform? And then Pochik, I think, is probably like the guy that provides the floor, but I don't think there's a ton of ceiling there.
He's also in a contract year as well. I mean, let's just be honest. Wyatt Teller, age 31 season. Joel Bitonio, age 34 season. Ethan Posich is 30 this year. All three of those guys are in contract years. And you're talking Teller's got 19 and a half in dead cap next year to not be on the roster because of all the void years from how they spent out and accelerated over the cap. Bitonio's got, the number's exactly right here, 23.5 in dead cap to not be under contract next year.
This is tough, man.
You gotta trade one of these guys and get something for a really offensive line hungry team.
Somebody needs a guard.
Because you have, we just talked about, you got a couple staple pieces and then a lot of youth in the skill group. You're running back the whole offensive line last year. Dude, they max voided out the Tevin Jenkins contract as 1 year, $3 million. They put 4 void years on the back end of it. This
is gonna get bad before it gets better. This is gonna get worse before it gets better.
This is not the worst the Cleveland Browns roster is going to be. So
call up Kansas City on these guards, probably, right?
You could. I'm sure there's a bunch of teams that would be more than willing to take a 1-year, $10 million roll of the dice. You'd probably get something decent for Wyatt Teller because he's age 31. And I'm only hammering this point home because you have Zinter with 3 years of player control.
Yeah.
DeJuan Jones has 2 years of player control. Luke Whippler, a 24-year-old center, thought he could play coming out of Ohio State. You got 2 years of player control left on that contract. You took these guys, you're not going to play any of them to just keep digging the grave with the nucleus of an offensive line. And I get you're probably going to have a young quarterback or you're going to have Joe Flacco back there. So protection, if you're going to be competitive, is going to be paramount. But just the whole intersection of the team, I liked the trend that they had with the skill group. And I hope between now and the start of the season, before they have to pay some of these option bonuses out, they do the same thing.
Well, we got Myles Garrett on defense.
We do. Got Mason Graham.
Yeah, the more you study this roster, the more, and I believed it at the time, the more I believe that their trade with Jacksonville made a lot of sense. I'm not sure that I would layer it with a lot of their other decisions that they made this offseason as making a lot of sense, but that particular move adds up to me. Myles Garrett, obviously, I think he's the best defensive player in the game. His running mate, though, is a bit of a question. Isaiah McGuire, who I liked quite a bit coming out of Missouri, had some flashes last year. He's going to get a big opportunity here because otherwise you're Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who didn't work out in Tampa, Agbo Okoronkwo, who's like faded off since they signed him as a player that we liked at the time. Alex Wright hasn't proven much. So you need Myles Garrett and you need McGuire to really, I think, take a step and then hope that one of those three depth players can give you some minutes off the bench here to solidify the edge situation.
Yeah. And if it doesn't, then that's when I look at, okay, now you've added Mason Graham to Malik Collins is here and Shelby Harris is still under contract. And Michael Hall had a very tumultuous and rocky rookie season last year, but he was their top pick from that draft class last year. So a lot of pressure falling back on, we're talking about the offensive line guys and guys that you used a third round pick on Zach Zinter and you want to see him. And same for Michael Hall, right? That was your marquee player with that draft class. And based off the edge group as a whole and some of the questions that exist and within the front seven, I know we're going to get to linebackers in after the break, but JOK not looking promising for his recovery from injury, right? So it just puts that much pressure on the rest of the front. You have a lot of irons in the fire with players that you drafted that based on your spending pattern have to hit for you. And if they don't, coming off of the regression that they had from 23 to 24, if that continues in 25 and you don't see growth from the young players, that's when I think you can really look at what the situation is in Cleveland and get a little apprehensive if you were a part of the decision-making process that brings a lot of these players into the fray.
I like Michael Hall, the football player. And I think there's a world where he can be the guy next to Mason Graham.
That's the right way to word it.
Yeah.
I like Michael Hall, the football player.
Yeah. So maybe Garrett, Graham, Hall, McGuire works out. Maybe.
And Harris and Collins are nice veteran players to serve as depth around that and be rotation pieces if that's the case.
Yeah. You don't want those to be your primary snap takers, right? But that's good. I think a lot of teams would love those players as good depth. Right now, you're looking at them as potentially playing the most snaps of this group outside of Mason Graham, who you expect to have a huge role as a rookie.
And can I just double down on that as well, that thought?
Mm-hmm.
We're getting ready to void out the Shelby Harris contract. We just talked about how a lot of teams would probably like to have him as a depth piece. Maybe we should see if somebody else wants to have him as a depth piece.
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting the short term taken care of so we can actually have a long term would be useful here in Cleveland. Okay, that's the trenches. We'll get to the defensive back seven here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us.
Carson Schlesinger. The end. I don't need to say anything. I'm in on the back seven. Guys got Carson Swessinger. We've been pretty direct thus far, and we haven't necessarily been direct about what buckets we're putting the players in, right? Because it's either a cornerstone or a quality starter or a lot of unknown / regressing players that makes it it's difficult for me to put Agbo Okoronkwo into a bucket because not that long ago I considered him a sufficient level starter. He's not the player that he was 2 years ago, right? Bitonio. I'm sure Bitonio and Teller, I put them both in sufficient level starter at this phase. But 2 years ago, they're both quality starters / cornerstone players. Right? We could probably go look it up and see exactly what we had them as. But so you either have players on the downturn, you have young players who are unproven, and you have a handful of cornerstone players / quality starters. So the conversation, at least for me coming in, knowing that we were doing Cleveland today, was a little bit less about what players I put the bucket in because there is a lot of lack of proof of concept and knowns. But if I'm going to bet on one player out of this young nucleus that they have here in Cleveland, it's going to be my guy Carson with the locks of sunshine from Remember the Titans. He's got crazy good flow and crazy good film.
Yeah, and obviously the unfortunate news of Owusu Koromoa missing the entire season makes that addition even more meaningful right now. Where, I mean, like Jordan Hicks is a sufficient level starter. They have Jerome Baker, Mo Diabate, Devin Bush. Like, this is probably one of the strengths of their team is what they have at the linebacker position. I still love Denzel Ward. I think it's a good football player. I still have him as a cornerstone. We'll see what happens with Greg Newsome long-term, right? He's playing under the 5th-year option this year. We'll see about Martin Emerson. I thought he kind of fell off after a really good start to his career as a rookie. Grant Delpit, sufficient level starter. Roddy Hickman kind of coming along. They have pretty decent safety depth.
I like Grant Delpit.
Yeah.
I thought about going a little higher. I didn't. I went sufficient level starter, but I thought about going a little higher. I mean, for the player that he was at LSU, and you finally seen him string together some consistent performance that lived up to having length and burst and aggression and physicality and some versatility at safety position. And that with how it has historically played with the second level in Cleveland, I think has been pretty complimentary the last couple of years. And I think Swessinger can allow that to continue, although you are going to now have the interruption with the JOK injury.
What'd you think of Hickman? Do you think that he's going to be able to ward off KZ as a starter?
I would be invested in making it happen if I were Cleveland. You know,
Right.
This is a age 24-year-old Ronnie Hickman who's a restricted free agent after this year, who you're going to have another year of player control on for, even if you just did the original round tender. I think this year that was like $3.2 million or something like that. And he went undrafted. So like, that is a little bit of a dice roll that you play when you do original round tender on a guy that didn't get drafted. But we saw Baltimore did that with Ardarius Washington, and Miami did that with Kader Kohu this year as two guys that went undrafted but got original round tenders, which effectively just kind of turns into a right of first refusal. But I think off the flashes that Ronnie showed, I would rather have that out there than KZ anyway.
Yeah. I feel Hickman and McGuire were like two players I irrationally liked.
Yeah.
As prospects, I'm like, all right, here we go. We're going to play here. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to see like if they become actual answers, and they're still going to have the opportunity to get plenty of playing time here this season.
Mm-hmm. So all things considered, I think the back seven is obviously aside of Myles Garrett. I would say the back seven is the strength of the team.
I totally agree with that.
Where Ward I have as a cornerstone. Delpit I have as a sufficient level starter. Thought about quality starter. Newsome I went back and forth a little bit, but I think the most recent play is that of a sufficient level starter. Hickman I have as incomplete evaluation, but leaning towards a sufficient level starter. Obviously, you have Carson Swessinger as a rookie. Jordan Hicks I have as a sufficient level starter. JOK would have been a quality starter if he was healthy. You mentioned some of the depth players between Baker and Devin Bush as stack backers. You're probably one piece away from your whole secondary, and that being the other outside corner, that I look at and feel pretty good about. Now, the depth's a different story, but it's the group I feel the best about this team, and it's playing behind the best defensive player in football, Myles Garrett. So that's probably where the foundation is set for Cleveland to try to come into this year and have aspirations.
Challenging schedule, challenging division, right? Like
the schedule's unreal.
Right. You went into the first 5. We talked a little in the pre-show, and you're just like, this team not starting off the year and being in a hole is hard to envision, especially with, regardless of who the quarterback is, it's either Joe Flacco or somebody who's never really played for the team. What was the first 5 again? You got it?
Home against Cincinnati, at Baltimore, home against Green Bay, at Detroit, home against Minnesota, and that one's overseas. So you lost a home game to play Minnesota overseas.
Yeah.
And then you come home the next week. You're not even off the next week. You come home and you're at Pittsburgh.
Welcome back.
So you go at Detroit, overseas against the Vikings, come home, no break at Pittsburgh.
It's tough, man. And if this team starts 1-5, 0-5, 0-6, not that crazy to think, right? I think
don't put the Dolphins squarely in the 1 week fired head coach bump territory. They play in week 7.
I was wondering, what are you talking about? Did I lose Kyle there for a second?
Yeah, I blacked out. They don't have their bye until week 9. We just talked about all that travel. They don't have a bye until week 9.
It's hard. It's hard to be overly optimistic about the Browns this year. I just wish that's fine. There's transitions, life cycles. That's totally fine. I just wish that there was a little bit more other than the trade back to acquire some future assets where we gave Myles Garrett all the money in the world for his age 31 to 35 season. We have these aging offensive linemen. It's let's embrace it, because you're in a division that has Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, and Pittsburgh's going to always have a floor.
And if Jimmy Haslam's going to jump on the sword for the Deshaun Watson trade, then every decision maker that's there in Cleveland, whether that's the GM, the head coach, the other prominent executives, you got to give him a pass. And you can say, wipe it clean.
I feel like they kind of have, though, right? But
yeah, but then let them wipe it clean.
Yeah.
Don't sit here and half hang on to the guys that were competitive in your last window. And I understand, the financials of some of the guys that we're talking about might be hard. We still don't know what Bryce Huff got in the San Francisco trade on Friday that was announced. But the Eagles are eating 2/3 of that salary. San Francisco's taking on $8 million in guaranteed salary. Is it a 2027 7th-round pick? Is it a 5th-round pick? Right. Schefter just said it was a day 3 pick. We don't know what it is or what year it's coming from. So, I understand how if you're looking at salary dump, you got to have teams that want a salary dump. Right?
Yeah.
And although to be fair, I don't know when these option bonuses might have been paid out. Yeah. Okay. So the Wyatt Teller one, they've already paid the bonus. They had to get cap compliant.
Hopefully they can.
So you'd be trading Wyatt Teller for $2.8 million.
Somebody would take that.
But that's all you'd be saving.
Yeah, but hopefully you can get a 5. Give yourself some darts to throw.
Kids, don't play the game. Don't be number 1 in the league in cash spending for 4 straight years. That'd be my advice. Because this is where you end up. Yeah. What else did I have? I think that was it. I think that's all I had. The Browns.
I'm good.
All right. That's going to do it for our Cleveland Browns showcase here today. On the show, Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino, we appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Monday, and we will be back again tomorrow to look at the Pittsburgh Cincinnati Bengals.
Hey, the playoff Steelers, don't forget.
Yeah, the playoff Steelers. So they're coming on Wednesday. So we hope to see you then.